When I accepted the job offer from the Foundation, I thought I'd finally made it. After years of dead-end security positions and soul-crushing retail work, a classified research facility seemed like a dream come true. The pay was exceptional, nearly 6 figures for what they described as containment observation and documentation specialist. The benefits package included medical, dental, psychological counseling, and something called breach insurance that I didn't fully understand but assumed was standard for high-security facilities. The recruitment process had been strange, I'll admit. No company name on the initial posting, just secure federal contractor, clearance required. The interview took place in an unmarked building downtown, conducted by a woman who introduced herself only as Dr. Castellanos. She asked unusual questions. How did I handle stress? Had I ever experienced anything I couldn't explain? What were my thoughts on the nature of reality? At the time, I chalked it up to government contractor eccentricity. "You'll be working at Site 77, Dr. Castellanos had explained, sliding a thick non-disclosure agreement across the desk. It's a secure research facility approximately 90 miles north of here. You'll live on site during your rotation, 2 weeks on, 1 week off. The work is classified, but I can tell you that you'll be monitoring certain assets, documenting their behavior, ensuring containment protocols are followed. Nothing you can't handle with your background." I'd signed without reading every page. Stupid, I know. But the salary figure at the bottom was enough to pay off my student loans in 2 years, maybe help my sister with her medical bills. I told myself whatever secrets they were keeping couldn't be that strange. Probably weapons research or experimental technology. Nothing I needed to worry about. I was wrong about everything. My first day at Site 77 started like any other job. Orientation, paperwork, the standard bureaucratic maze. The facility itself was buried in the mountains, accessible only by a long tunnel that descended deep into the earth. The entrance looked like a highway maintenance station, completely unremarkable. But once you passed through the security checkpoints, the illusion fell away. Sterile white corridors stretched in every direction, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that hummed with an electric intensity. Blast doors marked with hazard symbols divided the facility into sections. Armed guards stood at every intersection, their weapons unlike anything I'd seen in civilian security work. My supervisor, a man who introduced himself as Dr. Reeves, was waiting for me in processing. He was in his 50s, with gray hair receding from a high forehead and eyes that had seen too much. His handshake was firm but perfunctory, the grip of someone who'd done this orientation too many times. "Welcome to Site 77, he said without warmth. "You've signed your NDA, so I can speak freely. This facility houses and studies anomalous objects, entities, and phenomenon. Things that shouldn't exist according to conventional science. Your job is to observe, document, and most importantly, survive. Follow the protocols exactly as written, and you'll be fine. Deviate from them and—" He trailed off, his expression darkening. "Let's just say we have excellent life insurance." He led me through a maze of corridors, past heavy containment doors marked with designations I didn't understand. Euclid, Keter, Safe. Each door had a placard with a number. SCP-087, SCP-173, SCP-096. Dr. Reeves noticed my curiosity, but didn't elaborate. "Those are above your clearance level. he said curtly. "For now, you'll be working in the Delta Wing, documenting behavior patterns for lower-risk entities. But even low risk can be fatal if you're careless." We arrived at a small office space, my workspace for the next 2 weeks. A desk, a computer terminal, monitors showing various camera feeds, and a cabinet filled with logbooks. On the desk sat a laminated sheet of paper, the edges worn from handling. At the top, in bold red letters, it read, "Mandatory Survival Protocols for Delta Wing Personnel." "These are your rules," Dr. Reeves said, tapping the laminated sheet. "They're based on decades of observation and dozens of casualties. Every rule exists because someone died learning why it was necessary. Memorize them. Follow them exactly. No exceptions, no matter what seems logical in the moment. Logic doesn't apply here." He gave me a final appraising look, as if measuring whether I'd last the week, then left me alone with the rules and the flickering monitors. I picked up the laminated sheet and began to read. Rule 1. Never work alone between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always ensure another staff member is present in Delta Wing during these hours. If you find yourself alone during this time frame, immediately return to the central break room and wait for dawn. Rule 2. The water fountains on sub-level 4 are not for drinking. The liquid may appear to be water, but it is not. Personnel who consume this liquid typically disappear within 72 hours. There is no known antidote or preventative measure. Rule 3. If you hear knocking from inside any containment cell, do not acknowledge it. Do not respond, do not investigate, do not document it. Proceed with your duties as if you heard nothing. Rule 4. SCP-4721, the office plant in the break room, must be watered every day at exactly 6 p.m. Use only distilled water from the cabinet beneath the sink. If the plant appears to be wilting or changing color, evacuate Delta Wing immediately and contact emergency response. Rule 5. Never make direct eye contact with anyone in Corridor 7B after midnight. If someone in this corridor attempts to speak to you, keep your eyes on the floor and continue walking. They are not personnel. Rule 6. The elevator to sub-level 7 requires a key card. If the elevator doors open without you pressing the call button, do not enter. If you are already inside when the doors open to sub-level 7 without input, close your eyes and wait for the doors to close again. Do not look at what may be waiting outside. Rule 7. If you see a person wearing a hazmat suit with a completely black faceplate, give them wide berth and avoid interaction. Do not ask who they are. These entities are not hostile unless approached or questioned. Rule 8. All documentation must be handwritten in the provided logbooks. Never type observation notes directly into the computer system. The system is monitored by SCP-9843, which responds unpredictably to certain keywords. A list of forbidden words is posted inside each logbook. Rule 9. If you smell burning plastic in Delta Wing, you have approximately 3 minutes to evacuate the area before the smell becomes lethal. Do not attempt to locate the source. Proceed directly to the nearest emergency exit. Rule 10. During a containment breach alarm, Follow all evacuation protocols except in the case of a silver twilight event. If you hear silver twilight over the intercom, find the nearest closet or small enclosed space and remain absolutely silent until the all clear is given. Lock the door if possible. Do not attempt to evacuate. Rule 11. The janitor who cleans Delta Wing is not a janitor. He is SCP-7322. He is harmless as long as you acknowledge his work with a simple thank you when you see him cleaning. Never ask him questions. Never ask his name. Never touch him. Just thank him and continue with your duties. Rule 12. If you notice any doors marked with orange tape, they are not to be opened under any circumstances. If you see an orange-taped door that was not there during your last patrol, report it immediately to Dr. Reeves. Do not approach it. These doors lead nowhere safe. Rule 13. SCP-8891 in Containment Cell 7 appears as a mirror. You are required to check on it hourly, but you must never see your own reflection in it. Approach from the side, confirm the mirror is intact, and leave immediately. If you accidentally see your reflection, report to Medical Bay within 10 minutes. They may be able to help if you're fast enough. Rule 14. If at any point you encounter Dr. Reeves giving you instructions that contradict these rules, comply with his instructions only if he is wearing his identification badge on his left lapel. If the badge is on his right lapel or absent, excuse yourself politely and report the encounter to security. The real Dr. Reeves always wears his badge on the left. I read through the rules 3 times, my unease growing with each pass. Some of them seemed almost reasonable. Don't drink mysterious liquids, evacuate during gas leaks. But others? A plant that required such specific care it could trigger an evacuation? Entities disguised as personnel? A mirror that could harm you just by seeing your reflection? I wanted to believe it was some elaborate hazing ritual for new employees, but the worn edges of the laminated sheet, the serious tone in Dr. Reeves' voice, and the very real armed guards throughout the facility told me otherwise. Whatever worked here, whatever was contained behind those heavy doors, it wasn't normal. And these rules were all that stood between me and whatever fate had befallen my predecessors. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 8:47 a.m. My first shift had officially begun. The first few hours were routine, almost boring. I familiarized myself with the monitoring system, reviewed previous logs left by the last occupant of this position, no name, just Observer 12, and did my initial patrol of Delta Wing. The corridors were clean, well lit, and empty. The containment cells were sealed tight, their small observation windows dark. Everything seemed professional, organized, safe. By noon, I'd almost convinced myself the rules were exaggerated. Precautions based on unlikely scenarios, blown out of proportion by paranoid bureaucrats. Then I met the janitor. I was returning from lunch when I saw him, an older man, maybe 60, pushing a yellow cleaning cart down Corridor 4. He wore a standard gray jumpsuit, and his movements were slow and methodical as he mopped the floors. Something about him seemed off, though I couldn't pinpoint what. His posture, maybe, or the way he never seemed to blink. I remembered Rule 11 and felt foolish even thinking about it. But the consequences for breaking rules here seemed severe enough that I wasn't going to take chances. "Thank you," I said as I passed him, my voice sounding awkward in the empty corridor. He paused mid-swipe with the mop and turned his head toward me. For a brief moment, I saw something strange in his eyes. Not malice, but something ancient and inhuman, like looking into the eyes of a predator that had learned to mimic human behavior. Then he smiled, and the wrongness intensified. His teeth were just slightly too perfect, too white, arranged in his mouth with mathematical precision that human teeth never achieved. "You're welcome," he said, his voice perfectly pleasant but somehow hollow, like words played through a speaker. Then he returned to his mopping, and I hurried past. My hands were shaking when I got back to my office. That night, as my shift stretched toward midnight, the facility underwent a transformation. The harsh fluorescent lights seemed to flicker more frequently. The ambient sounds, the hum of ventilation, the distant echo of footsteps, took on an unsettling quality, as if the building itself were breathing. I found myself checking the clock obsessively, watching the minutes crawl toward 2 a.m. Rule 1 echoed in my mind. Never work alone between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. I'd been told that Dr. Chen, another observation specialist, would be joining me for the graveyard hours. But as 1:45 a.m. approached, I was still alone. I called his desk extension. No answer. I tried the Central Communications office. "This is Observer 15 in Delta Wing," I said when someone picked up. "I'm supposed to have another staff member here for the 2 to 4 shift. Can you confirm Dr. Chen's status?" There was a pause, then a woman's voice. "Dr. Chen called in sick. No replacement was assigned. You're solo tonight." My stomach dropped. The rules say I can't be alone during those hours. "The rules are guidelines," the voice replied with bureaucratic indifference. "You're cleared for solo observation. Just maintain standard protocols." "But Rule 1 is a suggestion based on statistical risk analysis, not a mandate. You'll be fine. Communications out." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then at the clock. 1:52 a.m. I had 8 minutes to decide whether to trust the rules or trust official channels. Dr. Reeves had been clear. Follow the rules, no exceptions. But an official operator had just told me they were merely guidelines. At 1:58 a.m., I made my decision. I grabbed my keycard and headed for the central break room, determined to wait out the dangerous hours as Rule 1 instructed. Whatever consequences I faced for abandoning my post, they couldn't be worse than whatever happened to people who broke these rules. The corridors of Delta Wing felt different as I hurried through them. The shadows seemed deeper, pooling in corners and doorways with unnatural darkness. The fluorescent lights flickered in sequence, as if something were moving through them, disrupting their power one by one. I walked faster, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the empty halls. That's when I heard it, knocking. 3 sharp raps against metal. I froze. The sound came from Containment Cell 4, about 20 feet ahead on my right. 3 more knocks, then silence. Rule 3. If you hear knocking from inside any containment cell, do not acknowledge it. Do not respond, do not investigate, do not document it. Proceed with your duties as if you heard nothing. I forced myself to keep walking, eyes straight ahead, maintaining an even pace despite every instinct screaming at me to run. The knocking came again, louder this time, more insistent. Then a voice muffled through the heavy door. "Hello? Is someone there? Please, I've been locked in here by mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm Dr. Morrison from Pathology. There's been a terrible mix-up." The voice sounded desperate, human, completely reasonable. But I remembered Dr. Reeves' warning. Logic doesn't apply here. I kept walking. "Please," the voice called out, now taking on a note of panic. "Please, don't leave me in here. The door's jammed. I can't breathe. Please." My hands clenched into fists, but I didn't stop. The voice followed me down the corridor, growing more frantic, more human, more convincing. By the time I reached the intersection, it had changed tactics. "Fine, don't help me, but you should know something's coming. Something's in here with me, and when it gets out, and it will get out, it's going to find you. It knows your name now. It knows where you sleep." I turned the corner, and the voice cut off abruptly, as if someone had flipped a switch. The break room was ahead, its door marked with a green "Safe Zone" placard. I reached it at 2:03 a.m. and practically fell through the doorway. Inside, the room was blessedly normal. A small kitchen area, some tables and chairs, a refrigerator, and in the corner, a potted plant that I assumed was SCP-4721. The plant looked ordinary enough. Green leaves, healthy stem, sitting in a terracotta pot. I checked the rules again. Water it every day at exactly 6 p.m. with distilled water. If it wilts or changes color, evacuate. Simple enough. I settled into one of the chairs and tried to calm my racing heart. The digital clock on the wall showed 2:07 a.m., 1 hour and 53 minutes until I could safely leave. Time moved differently in that break room. Each minute stretched like taffy, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. I tried reading some of the bulletins pinned to a corkboard, safety reminders, a schedule for the Christmas party, written in July, apparently they planned ahead, a faded photograph of a previous observation team with several faces scratched out. At 2:34 a.m., I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. They stopped just outside the break room door. Then 3 knocks, polite and patient. I didn't move. Rule 3 applied to knocking in containment cells, but what about knocking on regular doors? The rules didn't specify. The knocking came again. Then a familiar voice. "Observer 15, are you in there? It's Dr. Chen. Sorry I'm late. Got held up with paperwork." Dr. Chen, the colleague who was supposed to be here, but communications had said he called in sick. I stood slowly, approaching the door, but not opening it. "Dr. Chen," I called through the door, "I was told you called in sick." A pause, then, "Mix-up with the scheduling system. I'm here now. Could you let me in? It's not safe to be alone out here during these hours." That phrase sent ice through my veins. He was telling me exactly what I needed to hear, using my own fears against me. I looked at my watch, 2:37 a.m., still over an hour to go. "I'm actually fine in here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll wait until 4 a.m., then come out." Another pause, longer this time. When the voice came again, it had changed subtly. Still Dr. Chen's voice, but flatter somehow, like a recording. "That's not protocol. You need to let me in, now." "I don't think I will." The doorknob began to turn, slowly, testing whether it was locked. I'd thrown the deadbolt when I entered, thank God, but watching that knob rotate filled me with primal dread. The turning stopped. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Suit yourself. See you at 4 a.m. Footsteps retreated down the corridor. I didn't trust it for a second. I dragged one of the heavy chairs in front of the door and sat in another one, watching the clock and trying not to think about what might be waiting outside. At exactly 4 a.m., like someone had flipped a switch, the atmosphere changed. The oppressive weight I hadn't fully noticed lifted. The fluorescent lights stopped flickering. The air felt easier to breathe. I waited 5 more minutes to be safe, then cautiously opened the door. The corridor was empty, clean, and normal. Whatever walked these halls between 2 and 4 a.m. was gone now, returned to wherever it came from. I returned to my office and found everything exactly as I'd left it. On my desk was a note, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Good instincts. The thing pretending to be Dr. Chen got the last observer, Dr. Reeves. I sat down heavily, my hands still shaking from adrenaline. 1 shift down, 13 more days to go. Over the next few days, I developed a rhythm. I memorized the rules completely, studied the patrol routes, learned which corridors felt wrong at certain hours. I documented everything in the handwritten logbooks, carefully avoiding the forbidden words listed on the inside cover. Words like shadow, beneath, watching, teeth, and curiously, tomorrow. Dr. Reeves checked in occasionally, always wearing his badge on the left lapel. He seemed pleased with my progress, noting that I'd lasted longer than the previous 3 occupants of my position. When I asked what happened to them, his expression darkened. One didn't believe the rules. One thought he was smarter than the rules. One followed the rules perfectly until he encountered something we hadn't documented yet. He fixed me with a serious look. The job has a high turnover rate. That's why the pay is so good. On my 4th day, I encountered the water fountains on sub-level 4. I'd been assigned to deliver some documents to another department and taken the stairs down. The fountains were clearly marked with out-of-order signs, but as I passed them, I noticed the water was running. Crystal clear liquid flowed from the spout, pooling on the floor where the drain couldn't keep up. A man I didn't recognize stood near them, staring at the flowing water with intense concentration. He wore a lab coat, but no identification badge. As I watched, he leaned down and cupped his hands under the stream. "Don't!" I shouted before I could think. "That's not water!" He turned to look at me, his face slack and expressionless. Then he smiled, drank deeply from his cupped hands, and walked away without saying a word. I reported the incident to Dr. Reeves immediately. He listened with grim resignation, then made a note in his tablet. That was Dr. Morris from geology. He's been acting strange for the past week. We'll monitor the situation. He looked at me. In exactly 72 hours, he'll disappear. We won't find a body. We won't find any trace of him. He'll simply cease to exist. It happens every few months. Someone always drinks from those fountains, no matter how many warnings we post. What is it, the liquid? Dr. Reeves shook his head. We don't know. Every test we've run confirms it's ordinary water. But people who drink it
Something takes them, something we can't detect or prevent. That's why it's in the rules. Have you tried shutting off the water? Can't. The pipes aren't connected to our plumbing system. They're not connected to anything. They just produce liquid, endlessly. He closed his tablet. Welcome to the Foundation, where the answer to why is usually, we don't know, so just follow the rules. That night, I couldn't sleep during my off hours.
I kept thinking about Dr. Morris, walking away with that strange slack expression, knowing he had 3 days left before what? What happened to people who drank that water? I never found out. Exactly 72 hours later, Dr. Morris didn't show up for his shift. His apartment on site was empty, his personal effects untouched. The security footage showed him entering his room that night, but never leaving. Yet somehow, he was gone. Another victim of the things that lived in the spaces between normal reality. The plant incident happened on day 7. I'd been diligent about watering SCP-4721 every evening at 6 p.m., using only the distilled water from the cabinet. The plant seemed to respond positively, its leaves bright green, its stem strong. But that afternoon, around 4 p.m., I noticed something odd during my patrol. The plant had grown significantly. What had been a modest desk plant was now nearly 3 feet tall, its leaves spreading across the break room table. More concerning, some of the leaves had taken on a reddish tint, almost like they were blushing. I checked the rules. If the plant appears to be wilting or changing color, evacuate Delta Wing immediately. It wasn't wilting, but it was definitely changing color. Close enough. I hit the emergency alert button and announced over the Delta Wing intercom. All personnel evacuate Delta Wing. Potential SCP-4721 event. The response was immediate. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing off the wing. Personnel in hazmat suits entered through the secure entrance, armed with what looked like flamethrowers. I watched from the observation gallery as they approached the break room cautiously. What happened next was captured on the security cameras, and I've replayed it in my nightmares ever since. The plant erupted. Not violently, but rapidly, growing at an exponential rate, its leaves spreading across the walls, its roots bursting through the floor tiles. Within 60 seconds, the entire break room was choked with vegetation. The hazmat team opened fire with the flamethrowers, but the plant grew faster than it could burn. Vines lashed out, wrapping around one of the team members, pulling him toward the central mass where the original pot sat, now completely engulfed. They got him out, but barely. It took 4 hours and 3 separate flamethrower teams to finally kill the plant. When it was over, the break room was a charred ruin, and the air reeked of burning chlorophyll and something else. Something that smelled like rotting meat. Dr. Reeves found me in the observation gallery afterward, still staring at the scorched walls. "You did the right thing," he said quietly, calling the evacuation the moment you noticed the color change. Observer 9 didn't. He thought he'd just skip a watering and see what happened. What happened to him? The plant ate him. We found his skeleton inside the main stalk, completely clean, like it had been boiled. He put a hand on my shoulder. "The rules exist for a reason. You're learning that faster than most." A new plant arrived the next day, identical to the original. The cycle continued.
On day 9, I met the person who wasn't a person in Corridor 7B. It was just after midnight, and I was doing my routine patrol. Corridor 7B was usually empty at this hour. Most of the offices in that section were for day shift personnel. But as I entered the corridor, I saw someone standing at the far end, their back to me. They were wearing a standard Foundation uniform, nothing unusual. But something about their posture was wrong. They stood too still, like a statue, their arms hanging limply at their sides. I remembered Rule 5. Never make direct eye contact with anyone in Corridor 7B after midnight. Keep your eyes on the floor and continue walking. I lowered my gaze and continued forward, focusing on the tile patterns beneath my feet. Each step felt like miles. I could feel the person's presence, could sense them turning to face me as I approached, but I kept my eyes down. "Excuse me," a voice said as I drew near, perfectly normal, polite. "Do you have the time?" I didn't respond, didn't look up, just kept walking. The voice tried again, more insistent. "I asked you a question. It's rude to ignore people." My heart hammered, but I maintained my pace and my downward gaze. I could see their feet now in my peripheral vision. They were barefoot, in a government facility where shoes were mandatory. "Look at me!" The command hit like a physical force, and I felt my head wanting to lift, to obey. But I gritted my teeth and focused on the floor, counting tiles, thinking about anything other than the presence beside me. I passed them, kept walking. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, but I didn't stop, didn't look back. Finally, I reached the end and turned the corner. Only then did I dare glance behind me. Corridor 7B was empty. But on the floor where the person had been standing, there was a wet puddle. Not water, something darker, thicker. It was spreading slowly toward the walls, and in the fluorescent light, I could see movement in the liquid. Things swimming. Things with too many eyes. I reported it to maintenance and never asked what they found when they cleaned it up. The elevator incident came on day 11. I was returning from a meeting on sub-level 3 when I called the elevator. The doors opened immediately, which should have been my first warning. I stepped inside, pressed the button for Delta Wing, and the doors closed. Everything seemed normal until the elevator lurched. Instead of going up, it went down. The floor indicator showed sub-level 4, then sub-level 5, then sub-level 6. When it reached sub-level 7, a level I'd been explicitly told didn't exist on the official schematics, the elevator stopped. The doors opened.
Rule 6 flashed through my mind. If the elevator doors open to sub-level 7 without input, close your eyes and wait for the doors to close again. I slammed my eyes shut just as the doors fully opened, but closing my eyes couldn't block out what I heard. Whispering. Hundreds, maybe thousands of voices, all whispering in unison. The words were just below comprehension, like listening to a language that existed before language itself. The temperature in the elevator dropped, my breath forming frost crystals in the air. I could feel something outside, something massive and patient, aware of my presence. Then came the invitation, not in words, but impressed directly into my mind. Come, step out, see, understand, become. My body wanted to obey.
my legs tensed, ready to step forward into whatever waited beyond those doors. But I kept my eyes screwed shut and my feet planted, counting backwards from 100, focusing on anything other than the seductive pull of that summons. After an eternity, probably only 30 seconds, the doors closed. The elevator shuddered, then began ascending. When the doors opened again on Delta Wing, I practically fell out, gasping for air I hadn't realized I was holding. Dr. Reeves was waiting in the corridor, looking concerned. "You went to 7, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, still shaking. "And you kept your eyes closed?" "Yes." He let out a breath. "Good. Very good." Observer 7 opened his eyes. We had to retire him early. Retire? Dr. Reeves didn't elaborate, just clapped me on the shoulder and walked away. But I noticed he was wearing 2 identification badges, one on the left lapel, one on the right. I remembered Rule 14. The real Dr. Reeves always wears his badge on the left. If it's on the right or absent, report the encounter to security. But he had both. Did that count? Was this the real Dr. Reeves, or something pretending to be him? And if so, which badge was I supposed to trust? I decided not to find out.
I turned and walked quickly back to my office, locked the door, and didn't leave until my shift ended hours later. In the morning, when I saw Dr. Reeves again, he was wearing only one badge, on the left lapel. He acted like nothing had happened. I didn't ask. My 12th day started with the smell of burning plastic. I'd been reviewing documentation when the acrid scent hit my nostrils. Faint at first, then growing stronger. I checked the rules immediately. Rule 9. If you smell burning plastic in Delta Wing, you have approximately 3 minutes to evacuate before the smell becomes lethal. I didn't waste time investigating. I grabbed my essential documents, hit the emergency evacuation alarm, and ran for the nearest exit. Other personnel responded immediately. This was clearly a drill everyone had practiced. Within 2 minutes, Delta Wing was empty. We waited in the safe zone for 30 minutes. When the hazmat team went in to investigate, they found nothing burning, no source for the smell. But they confirmed the air quality had become toxic: carbon monoxide, chlorine gas, and several compounds that didn't match anything in their database. If anyone had stayed longer than 5 minutes, they would have died. "Where does it come from?" I asked Dr. Reeves as we waited for clearance to return. "We don't know," he admitted. "It happens every few months. The air just becomes poisonous. No source, no cause, no warning except the smell. It's been happening since we built this facility 30 years ago. The original construction crew reported the same phenomenon. They lost 3 workers before they understood to evacuate." "What's underneath us?" I asked. "What's down there causing this?" Dr. Reeves looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Some questions are better left unasked. The final test came on my 13th day, the Silver Twilight event. I was doing a routine patrol when the alarms began. Not the standard evacuation alarm, but something different. A low, pulsing tone that seemed to vibrate in my bones. Then the intercom crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. We are experiencing a Silver Twilight event. I repeat, Silver Twilight. Do not evacuate. Find the nearest enclosed space and remain silent until the all clear." Rule 10, I was near the storage closet in Corridor 5. I sprinted for it, yanked open the door, and squeezed inside among the cleaning supplies. The door had a lock. I threw it and then crouched in the darkness, barely breathing. The lights outside went out. Not all at once, but in sequence, darkness rolling down the corridor like a wave. Then came the sound. Footsteps, but wrong. Too many joints, too many legs. And breathing. Heavy, wet breathing that echoed from everywhere and nowhere. Something walked past my closet. I could see its shadow through the crack beneath the door. Long, distorted, moving with a gait that shouldn't be possible. The shadow stopped outside my door. The doorknob rattled once, testing it. I held my breath, my hand clamped over my mouth to muffle even the sound of my own pulse. The shadow remained for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, it moved on. More shadows followed, different shapes, different sizes. Some crawled on the ceiling, some seemed to phase through the walls, but they all moved with purpose, like they were searching for something. Or someone. I lost track of time in that closet. It could have been 10 minutes or 10 hours. Finally, the lights came back on, and the intercom announced, "All clear. Silver Twilight has concluded. Personnel may resume normal activities." I waited 5 more minutes before daring to open the door. The corridor was empty, normal, like nothing had happened. But on the floor outside my closet, there were wet marks. Footprints, if you could call them that. Each one had at least 6 toes. When I asked Dr. Reeves about it later, he looked tired.
Silver Twilight events are intrusions, he explained. Something from outside our reality. Visits. We don't know why. We don't know what they want. But if they find you during an intrusion, you don't come back. Not as yourself, anyway. He shuddered. Observer 5 tried to evacuate during a Silver Twilight event. We found him 3 days later, alive, but wrong. He couldn't remember his own name, couldn't recognize his family. He just kept drawing the same symbol over and over. Dr. Reeves pulled out his tablet and showed me a picture. The symbol made my eyes hurt to look at. We had to let him go. Last I heard, he was in a psychiatric facility, still drawing. On my 14th and final day, I encountered the mirror, SCP-8891, in Containment Cell 7. I'd been checking it hourly as required, always approaching from the side, never looking directly at it. The mirror itself was beautiful, an antique thing with an ornate silver frame, the glass perfectly clear. But there was something wrong about it. The reflections it showed were slightly off time, moving a fraction of a second before the real motion occurred. And sometimes, if you weren't careful, you'd see things in the background that weren't there in reality. I'd been diligent about following Rule 13, always keeping my approach angle careful, verifying the mirror's integrity without ever catching my own reflection. But on that final day, during my last hourly check, something went wrong. I approached from the left side as always, keeping my eyes on the mirror's frame rather than its surface. Everything appeared intact, no cracks, no anomalies. I was about to leave when I heard a sound from inside the cell, a soft whimper, like someone crying. Rule 3 said not to acknowledge knocking from containment cells, but it didn't say anything about crying. And this sounded human, genuinely distressed. "Hello?" I called out, stepping closer to the observation window. That's when I made my mistake.
I stepped too far forward, and for just a split second, I saw myself in the mirror. But it wasn't me. Not quite.
The reflection smiled while I wasn't smiling. Its eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty. And in the background behind it, I could see Delta Wing, but not as it was now. The corridors were filled with people I didn't recognize, all standing motionless, all staring directly at the mirror, at me. I jumped back, my heart hammering. 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to get to medical bay before... What? Before what happened to me? The rules didn't specify. I ran. The medical bay was on sub-level 2, 3 floors down. I took the stairs, not trusting the elevator, taking them 2 at a time. My watch showed I'd been exposed for maybe 3 seconds. How bad could 3 seconds be? I burst through the medical bay doors at the 8-minute mark. A nurse looked up, startled by my sudden entrance. "Mirror exposure," I gasped. "SCP-8891, maybe 3 seconds." Her expression changed instantly from surprise to alarm. She hit a button on her desk, and within seconds, 2 doctors in hazmat suits appeared. They grabbed me, not roughly, but urgently, and dragged me to an examination room. "How long ago?" one of them demanded. 8 minutes, maybe 9 now. Shit. They strapped me to a chair, which terrified me until I realized they were trying to help. One of them produced a syringe filled with something that glowed faintly blue. "This is going to hurt, a lot. But if we don't do this, what happens next will be worse." They injected me before I could ask what they meant. The liquid felt like ice in my veins, spreading from my arm throughout my body. Then came the pain. Not physical exactly, but something deeper. It felt like something was being ripped out of me, something that had already taken root in the 3 seconds I'd looked at that mirror. I screamed. The doctors held me down as my body convulsed.
And in my mind, I could see it. The thing that had started growing inside me. The reflection that wanted to replace me, to wear my skin and walk back out into the world. The injection was killing it, burning it out before it could fully form. After 5 minutes that felt like hours, the pain subsided. I slumped in the chair, drenched in sweat, my muscles trembling from the exertion. "You got here in time," one of the doctors said, checking my vitals. "Another minute or 2 and we couldn't have helped you. The replacement would have been too far developed. What happens if you don't get here in time?" The doctors exchanged a look. "The thing in the mirror doesn't just show you a reflection. It creates a copy. A perfect copy that slowly overwrites the original. By the time most people realize something's wrong, it's too late. The copy is them, and they're somewhere else. In the mirror, we think, trapped in whatever reality it shows. They kept me under observation for 3 hours, running tests, making sure the replacement was truly gone. Finally, they cleared me. You're very lucky," the nurse said as she signed my discharge papers. "Most people don't make it to medical bay in time. They hesitate, convince themselves they're fine, try to finish their shift." She looked at me seriously. "You followed the rules. That's why you're still you." I returned to Delta Wing to finish my final shift. Only 3 hours left. I could make it. Dr. Reeves was waiting in my office when I arrived. He studied me carefully, then seemed satisfied with whatever he saw. "I heard about the mirror incident," he said. "You handled it correctly. That's good." He sat down across from my desk, his expression thoughtful. 2 weeks? You've survived 2 weeks. Do you know how rare that is? Out of the last 10 people we've hired for your position, only 2 have made it past the first week. You're the first to complete a full rotation in over a year. "What happened to the others?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. 1 drank from the water fountain. 2 broke Rule 1 and encountered what walks the halls between 2 and 4 a.m. 1 opened an orange-taped door. 3 didn't believe the rules were serious and learned otherwise. 1, he trailed off, shaking his head. 1 encountered something we didn't have a rule for yet. That's the real danger here. The rules cover the known hazards, but this place is alive with things we're still discovering. New anomalies, new dangers. The rules are always one death behind. He pulled out a document and placed it on my desk. Your contract is coming up for renewal. The Foundation would like you to continue. The pay increases to $150,000 for your second rotation, plus hazard bonuses, plus the knowledge that you're helping keep these things contained, keeping them from getting out into the world. I looked at the contract, then at Dr. Reeves. And if I say no? Then you sign an extended NDA, undergo some light memory suppression therapy to remove classified details, and return to civilian life. No hard feelings. This job isn't for everyone. In fact, it's not for most people. He stood. Think about it. You have until the end of your week off to decide. After he left, I sat alone in my office, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights, watching the monitors show empty corridors and sealed containment cells. I thought about everything I'd seen. The janitor who wasn't a janitor. The plant that grew and consumed. The thing in the elevator. The shadows during silver twilight. The mirror that wanted to replace me. I thought about Dr. Morris, who would simply cease to exist in a few hours. About Observer 5, broken by what he'd seen during an evacuation. About all the people who'd sat in this chair before me and made the wrong choice at the wrong moment. And I thought about the rules. Those 14 rules that had kept me alive when logic and training would have failed. Rules that seemed insane until you understood the reality they were trying to protect you from. My shift ended at 6 a.m. I packed up my personal items, did one final check of the monitors, and prepared to leave Delta Wing for my week off. As I walked toward the exit, I passed the janitor one last time. "Thank you," I said automatically. He paused his mopping and looked at me with those two perfect eyes. "You're leaving?" It was the first time he'd said something other than, "You're welcome." The first time he'd initiated conversation. I remembered Rule 11. Never ask him questions, never ask his name, never touch him. "Just for a week," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I'll be back." He nodded slowly. "Good. The others who leave, they don't usually come back. But you're different. You listen. You learn." He returned to his mopping. "The facility likes you. It wants you to stay." I didn't ask what he meant by "the facility likes you." I just nodded and continued walking. Dr. Castellanos met me at the surface entrance, the same woman who'd recruited me 2 weeks ago. She smiled warmly, as if I'd just returned from a pleasant vacation rather than 2 weeks in an underground facility full of reality-bending horrors. "Congratulations on completing your first rotation," she said, handing me an envelope. "Your payment plus a completion bonus. Take your week off, relax, process what you've experienced, and think about whether you want to come back." The drive home felt surreal. The normal world, traffic lights, fast food restaurants, people going about their ordinary lives, seemed fake somehow, like a stage set. After 2 weeks surrounded by things that defied reality, normal reality felt like the anomaly. That night, I opened the envelope. Inside was my payment check,
and a smaller, handwritten note. You have good instincts.
The Foundation needs people who can follow rules even when they don't make sense, especially then. We hope to see you back at Site 77, but if you choose not to return, know that you've done important work. These things exist whether we acknowledge them or not. Better they're contained than free. Dr. Reeves. I spent my week off trying to return to normal. I visited my sister, helped her with bills using my substantial paycheck. I met up with old friends who asked about my new job. I gave them the cover story I'd been provided. Classified government contract work, mostly documentation, really boring actually. But at night, I dreamed about the corridors of Delta Wing, about the sounds between 2 and 4 a.m., about the thing in the elevator, still waiting in sub-level 7, about all the orange-taped doors I'd never opened, and what might be behind them. On my 6th day off, I received a message from an unknown number. Emergency situation at Site 77. Dr. Reeves requesting all available personnel report immediately. Not mandatory, but appreciated. New anomaly emerged. Need experienced observers who know the rules. I stared at the message for a long time. My rational mind screamed at me to ignore it, to stay in the safe, normal world, to never go back to that place. But another part of me, the part that had learned to trust the rules, the part that had survived 2 weeks of the impossible, knew I was going back. Because Dr. Reeves was right. These things existed, and someone had to watch them. Someone had to maintain the rules. Someone had to stand between the anomalies and the unsuspecting world above. I grabbed my keys and drove back to Site 77. The facility was in lockdown when I arrived. Emergency lights flashed and armed response teams moved through the corridors with grim efficiency. Dr. Reeves met me at the security checkpoint, looking exhausted. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We had an incident in Delta Wing. Something new." Something we're still trying to understand. What happened? You remember the orange-taped doors, the ones that appear spontaneously? He led me down a corridor I didn't recognize, deeper into the facility than I'd been before. One opened on its own, for the first time in 30 years. We stopped in front of a door that hadn't been there during my rotation. It was covered in orange tape, but the tape was torn, hanging in strips. The door itself was ajar, darkness visible beyond it. "What came out?" I asked. "Nothing, yet, but we can hear something moving inside, something big." He handed me a tablet showing thermal imaging of the space beyond the door. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Heat signatures that didn't conform to any living thing I recognized. We need someone to go in and establish what we're dealing with. Someone who understands that the rules exist for a reason. Someone who won't do anything stupid. I looked at the door, then at Dr. Reeves. "You want me to go in there?" "I'm asking you to. You don't have to. You're not even officially back on duty." "But..." He trailed off, his expression showing something I hadn't seen before: fear. "You're the only one I trust not to panic. The only one who's proven they can follow instructions when everything is screaming at them to do the opposite." I thought about the rules that had kept me alive. Rules written in blood and learned through death.
Rules that existed because someone before me hadn't survived to pass them on. "If I go in there," I said slowly, "we're going to need a new rule. Rule 15. Dr. Reeves managed a grim smile. "Probably several new rules based on what I'm seeing on these sensors." I took a deep breath and stepped toward the door. As I did, Dr. Reeves called out, "Remember, the rules exist because someone died learning why they were necessary. Don't be the one who teaches us Rule 15. I nodded and pushed the door open wider.
The darkness beyond was absolute, swallowing the light from my flashlight. But I could hear it now, the sound Dr. Reeves had mentioned. Not footsteps exactly, more like something dragging itself across a surface that wasn't quite floor. I stepped through the doorway. Behind me, I heard Dr. Reeves speaking into his radio. "Observer 15 has entered the anomaly. Begin documentation. And someone get me the chaplain, just in case." The door swung shut behind me, and I was alone in the dark with whatever had been waiting behind that orange tape for 30 years. But that's a story for another day, if I survive to tell it. For now, let me give you the same advice Dr. Reeves gave me on my first day. If you ever find yourself working somewhere with rules that seem insane, follow them anyway. Rules in places like this aren't suggestions. They're not guidelines. They're the accumulated wisdom of everyone who came before you, the people who survived and the people who didn't. The rules exist for a reason, and the reason is usually much worse than you can imagine. Final note. I signed the contract renewal. I'm writing this during my second rotation at Site 77, during one of my breaks. I've learned 3 new rules since that incident with the orange door. I've survived encounters with 2 more anomalies that weren't in the original documentation. And I've started understanding something that Dr. Reeves never explicitly said, but that everyone who works here eventually realizes. The rules aren't just about surviving the anomalies. They're about keeping the anomalies from realizing we're watching them. Some of the things contained at Site 77 are sleeping. Others are waiting. A few are testing us, probing the protocols, looking for weaknesses. And if they ever figure out the full extent of what we're doing, if they ever coordinate, if they ever decide to act together instead of in isolation, well, let's just say the 14 rules for Delta Wing would be the least of humanity's concerns. So I keep watching. I keep documenting. I keep following the rules. Because someone has to. And because the alternative, a world where these things aren't contained, aren't monitored, aren't controlled, is too terrifying to contemplate. Sleep well, knowing there are facilities like Site 77 scattered around the world. Places where people like me stand watch over things that shouldn't exist but do. Places where following the rules is the only thing standing between you and the things that hunger in the dark. Just remember, if you ever get a job offer for a secure research facility with excellent pay and strange rules, read those rules carefully. Your life will depend on it. This account was recovered from the personal files of Observer 15, Site 77, Delta Wing. Observer 15 completed 4 full rotations before requesting transfer to a surface facility. Psychological evaluation indicated moderate trauma, but no exposure to memetic hazards. Subject was granted transfer and signed extended NDA. Current whereabouts classified. Note: Delta Wing was decommissioned in 2024 following a catastrophic breach event. The 14 rules remain archived for reference. Current death toll from Delta Wing operations: 47 personnel over 30 years. Observer 15's account has been added to training materials for new Foundation recruits. Remember, the rules exist for a reason.